Wait, can you start over?
To our beautiful son, Shlomo Naveh. You're named after two significant people in your family. Shlomo Chasson, your Ima's maternal grandfather, Saul Hassan, whose Shloshim is tonight, and Miriam Penina, or Pearl Novik, my paternal grandmother, who passed away in November. As we share with you the meaning of your name, we hope to express our wishes that you actualize your own potential to the fullest, tapping into the kochot and values of those before you to help guide you as you venture out on a beautiful, meaningful life of being the best version of yourself and the best Oved Hashem that you can be.
Shlomo Naveh. Both of your names, Shlomo and Naveh, are found in Tanakh. Of course, there's Shlomo HaMelech, the king who brought majesty to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's kingship and to the Jewish people in an unprecedented way. During his time, there was peace, prosperity, and stability for the Jewish people, the likes of which we haven't seen since. Even the meaning of the name Shlomo reflects the peace that characterized his time as king. And Shlomo had a second name, divinely bestowed, Yedidyah, beloved of God. Shlomo, through his reign, brought nations from near and far to a place of awe and recognition of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shlomo Naveh, we hope you too know such peace, are beloved by God, and bring greatness to God's name. Shlomo was known for his wisdom, a request granted by HaKadosh Baruch Hu when Shlomo, at the young age of 12, acknowledged that V'anochi na'ar katon lo eda tzet vavo, that at such a young age, he did not have the leadership experience that might be expected of a king. So what did he ask of Hashem? V'natata la'avdecha lev shomea lishpot v'amcha lavin bein tov l'ra. That Hashem grant Shlomo, his servant, an understanding mind to judge his people, to distinguish between good and bad. And Hashem was pleased with Shlomo's request, and in response, didn't just bestow him with wisdom, matched by no other in all history, but also granted Shlomo additional blessings of unprecedented glory, wealth, and long life. Shlomo Naveh, we wish for you that you have the clarity to know what you need like Shlomo did at the start of his reign, that you ask for and receive HaKadosh Baruch Hu's bountiful blessings, and that your blessings exceed your greatest ask. And may your requests always align ultimately with HaKadosh Baruch Hu's will, such that Beitar hadavar ve'inei Hashem, that Hashem will be pleased with what you ask, as he was pleased with Shlomo HaMelech. Shlomo HaMelech's great wisdom is put to the test during his pursuit of justice. In the famous episode where Shlomo successfully determines which of two harlots was the mother of a living baby, Shlomo did not just use his wisdom for royal matters, but to judge any person, even those who might be cast as the lowly portions of society. And the people recognized that his wisdom and justice was divine. Shlomo Naveh, may you be one to use your wisdom to increase justice and righteousness in this world, regardless of who stands before you. We are told in Malachim Aleph Perek Hey that Shlomo was tremendous in both his teaching and understanding. He increased the people's love for Torah, crafting 3,000 parables and 1,500 songs. Shir Shirim Rabbah describes how through his parables, he made Torah understandable to all, and he knew about every tree and creature. The Midrash goes as far as to say that he understood animal speech. Shlomo Naveh, may you have the skill of making Torah understandable and beloved both to you and to others, and may you understand and be in awe of the world around you, so that when you see God's creations, they speak up with his messages loud and clear, impacting your life for the better and making it ever more beautiful as the world around you bursts into song. And of course, Shlomo HaMelech's vision for building the Beit HaMikdash, not just as a place for Am Yisrael to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but as described in Malachim Aleph Perek Chet, as a place where other nations will hear about Hashem's greatness and will come pray, and where Hashem's name will be attached to the Beit HaMikdash, so that all the peoples of the earth will know Hashem's name and revere him. I see many parallels between my grandfather, Saul Hassan, and Shlomo HaMelech. Shlomo HaMelech was someone who rose from destruction. He was born to David and Bathsheba after their first son died, and was promised to be the next in line to the throne, a promise that his mother Bathsheba made sure David kept. Grandpa too was also chosen, though not by his choice, to continue his family's legacy following tragedy. As one to have survived the Holocaust with his sister, when the rest of his family was murdered, he rose from that loss and built a dynasty, maybe not quite on Shlomo HaMelech's scale, but built a legacy and family with which to share his deep-rooted Jewish values and Sephardic traditions. And Grandpa was put in a place to navigate it all at the tender age of 12, just like the age at which Shlomo HaMelech became king. Grandpa only turned 13 while on the boat traveling across the Atlantic to the United States to escape the Nazis. And it seems to me that Grandpa, too, was bestowed with that extra dose of wisdom, to survive and ultimately thrive in a foreign country with Italian as his mother tongue. Throughout his life, Grandpa's counsel was often sought by those who knew him, turned to for a wise, thought-out opinion, or to share advice at a synagogue board meeting. He sought justice, like Shlomo HaMelech, always having an eye out for those less well-off, and willing to give the coat off of his back to help, which he is known to have done on numerous occasions. And Grandpa had a broad understanding of the world, always handy and knowing how to mend or fix, caught up in schooling and rising to academic achievements already in high school, and working in his adult life as a successful engineer. And Grandpa had an understanding of nature, learning to use the wind to propel his sailboat forward in the best way. In our family, there is no doubt that Grandpa carried the royalty of Shlomo HaMelech that garnered all of our respect and helped instill a love of Torah and Jewish living in our eyes.
Your second name Naveh has a number of meanings. One is that it refers to something pretty or beautiful, sharing a root with the word na'eh for beauty, or with the word noi, meaning decoration or an ornament. We chose this name to reflect Savta's name Penina or Pearl, sharing the beauty of the name Naveh. But Naveh also refers to a place, specifically a place of pasture in the desert. We see this as well as a representation of Savta's life. She is someone who built a stable, warm, safe, and loving home for her 4 boys who experienced the loss of a parent. She turned what could have been a desolate wilderness into a home of growth and flourishing. In Yeshayahu 32:18, there is a prophecy for the future that V'yashav ami b'naveh shalom uv'mishkenot mivtachim uv'menuchot sha'ananot. Then my people shall dwell in Naveh Shalom, beautiful homes, peaceful homes, in secure dwellings, in untroubled places of rest. We feel this is something that Savta was able to create for her family in her personal home, and opened her doors beyond her family for those who needed. I only learned of many of her incredible acts of chesed after she passed, like when she took in a Jewish immigrant couple with little means and hosted their wedding in her New York City apartment. And finally, Naveh can mean Beit HaMikdash, or Beit HaShechina, a house for God. As we say in Az Yashir, Nahalta be'azdecha al Naveh Kachecha. In your strength, you guide them to your holy abode. Savta is someone who looks forward and invested in Jewish potential coming to fruition, specifically in Israel, our homeland, God's holy abode. Perhaps this is somewhat reminiscent of Savta's namesake Miriam, who also anticipated the redemption in Egypt and already had tambourines prepared for the occasion. Savta was someone who saw the significance of the Jewish people's return to Israel in her time, and was actively involved in purchasing Israel bonds. She always felt it important to support Israel, and that was one of her ways of doing so. Serena only met my Savta a couple of times in her later years, and the word she would use to describe her was regal. Savta was always dressed in nice clothes and put together very similar to Serena's grandpa. She truly did carry herself with the beauty of the word Naveh. I remember when I was young, my Saba and Savta would take the whole extended family to a hotel, and we would play at the pool. Both of them would sit on the side in business casual attire, never a bathing suit. Yet despite Savta's regal look, she was exceptionally warm and inviting. She made friends throughout the neighborhood and reached out to help those in need. But everything she did was in a soft-spoken, modest way. And in that sense, Savta was also like a Penina, or pearl. When I got married, Serena taught me how you can tell the difference between a real pearl and a fake one. Good to know when you're buying people for your wife jewelry. The fake ones are perfect circles, but true pearls are not perfect in shape. There is beauty to them, but also modesty as they embrace imperfection. Naveh in its meaning of pasture within a desert or wasteland is also that type of unexpected beauty. Beauty rising from the barrenness of the desert, a blend of something ornate and humble, like what Savta embodied. Savta somehow combined both attributes in how she lived her life: regal but soft-spoken and warm to all. Always someone to look up to, but also someone you could relate to. Even the way that a pearl is created teaches us some of Savta's lessons. A pearl forms when an oyster seeks a way to cope with an irritant particle that enters its shell. How does it cope? By covering the particle with layer upon layer of a smooth surface, of a smooth substance, ultimately demonstrating resilience. Through the process of transforming something that was originally an annoyance into something exquisite, a pearl. Savta always emphasized the good, the blessings, and would not look for or find a reason to complain, but would rather find the beautiful. We know that Savta's legacy and trails live on with all of her family, and it is our hope that they are now passed on as well to our beautiful Shlomo Naveh.
And finally, Our Shlomo Naveh, we have to take a few moments to share our thoughts as to how your name relates to the times we're living in. In Shmuel Bet, there's a beautiful passage found in Perek Zion, one that both promises the eternal nature of Malchut Beit David that will continue with Shlomo as next in line, and where Naveh is referenced as a place of pasture. I want to read from this Perek and share how it resonates with us. The backdrop is that David is sitting, finally settled in his home and at ease, safe from enemies. In his opening pasuk, you can feel the stark contrast of his current situation of sitting peacefully to his years of being on the run and battling a contested kingship. And now David is fortunate to be sitting in his house, secure both physically and in stature. But rather than kick his feet up and take a moment to relish the success of being king in his palace at long last, we get insight into what is really nagging at David as we're privy to the inner thoughts that he confides in Natan HaNavi. V'yomer HaMelech HaNatan HaNavi, Re'ena Anochi Yoshev B'Beit HaRazim, V'Aron HaElokim Yoshev B'Toch HaYiriyah. Here I am, dwelling in a house of cedar, while the ark of Hashem abides in a tent. David can't ignore the profound dissonance of his own residence in an established palace, while the King of Kings resides in a temporary dwelling. Natan HaNavi immediately responds to David that Hashem is with him, and therefore David has a Kadosh Baruch Hu's blessing to do what he has in mind, essentially giving the go-ahead to build a Beit HaMikdash. But ultimately, Natan is corrected by Hashem in a nevuah later that night. Lech v'amarta el David, K'amar Hashem ha'tativ neli bayit l'shivti. Are you the one, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to build a house for me to dwell in? Ki lo yashavti b'bayit l'miyom haloti b'nei Yisrael mitzrayim v'ad hayom hazeh. V'yami talech b'ol v'mishkan. From the day that I, Hashem, brought the people of Israel out of Mitzrayim to this day, I have not dwelt in a house, but have moved about in a tent in the Mishkan. B'chol asher hitalachti b'chol b'nei Yisrael hadavar dibarti et echad shivtei Yisrael asher tiviti l'rot dami et Yisrael lemor lama v'nitem li beit harazim. As I moved about, says Hashem, wherever the Israelites went, did I ever reproach any of the leaders whom I appointed to care for my people Israel? Why have you now not built me a house of cedar? Hashem is seemingly relating to David. I've never had a home. I, Kadosh Baruch Hu, am used to wandering, and have never made a big fuss about it to those leaders who could have done something to change it. V'ata ko tomar l'avdi David, ko amar Hashem tzvakot, ani lekachticha min hanaveh me'achar hatzom liot nagid al ami al Yisrael. Further say the following to my servant David, thus says Hashem, I took you, David, from the Naveh, from the pasture, from following the flock to be ruler of my people Israel. Hashem is describing the amazing transition he helped David undergo. From someone who wandered the pastures with his sheep, who likely knew very well that feeling of lack of permanence, of always seeking the next Naveh, that next ideal pasture, and then was brought from there to a position of leadership and greatness. V'samti makom la'ami l'Yisrael, untativ v'shachan tachtav, v'lo yirgaz od, v'lo yosifu b'nei avla lanotok asher b'rishonah. Hashem says, I will establish a home for my people Israel, and will plant them firmly, so that they shall dwell securely and shall tremble no more. Evil men shall not oppress them any more as in the past, meaning not only will you no longer wander as a shepherd, David, but the whole nation of Israel will be planted firmly in their land with nothing to fear. And then Hashem promises David eternity, a lasting legacy, a dynasty. When your days are done and you lie with your fathers, I will raise up your offspring after you, one of your own, and I will establish his kingship, the son who we now know to be Shlomo. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish his royal throne forever. Hashem is promising that David's child Shlomo will be one who will carry out the dreams of his father, will share his vision and values in bringing honor to God, and he will build that Naveh that will be a Kadosh Baruch Hu's dwelling place. And the relationship this child will have with Hashem will be a close one. Ani yalo la'av, v'hu yali leven, asher bavoto v'chachtiv v'shevet anashim uv'ngei b'nei adam. I will be a father to him, to Shlomo, and he shall be a son to me. When he does wrong, I will chastise him. But I will never withdraw my favor from him, as I withdrew it from Shaul. Your house and your kingship shall ever be secure before you.
What a promise. Though not one that David will witness in full, it is the most enduring promise. One not just for him, but for the generations after him. That through his son Shlomo, there will be a dynasty that lasts forever. That Shlomo will be the builder of the Beit HaMikdash. That Hashem will see him as his son, and will never remove his chesed from him. Shlomo Naveh, it is our hope that you take part in that same promise. And here at the end of the prophecy handed over by Natan, we have David sitting once again, almost as he was at the start of the parak. Vayavo hamelach David vayeshev lifnei Hashem. This time not described as sitting in his palace, a place of being exalted and on high, rather sitting before Hashem, in a place of humility, and praising HaKadosh Baruch Hu am I to have received this blessing, or for my household to be blessed this way. V'yomer mi anochi Adonai Elohim umi v'iti ki heviatani ad halom. Then King David came before Hashem and said, "What am I, O Hashem, and what is my family that you have brought me thus far?" And he praises Hashem in response. Al ken gidalta Hashem Elokim ki ein kamocha ve'ein Elokim zulatecha. You are great indeed, O Hashem. There is none like you, and there is no other God but you. ומקמך ישראל גוי אחד בארץ אשר הלכו אלוקים לפדות לו לעם ולשום לו שם ולעשות לכם הגדולה. And who is like you people Israel, a unique nation on earth, whom God went and redeemed as his people, winning renown for himself and doing great and marvelous deeds for them. ותכונן לך את עמך ישראל לך לעם עד עולם ואתה Hashem hayita lahem lelokim. You have established your people Israel as your very own people forever, and you, O Hashem, have become their God. And with David's conclusion, you feel him guiding us in the love between a people and their God, and a feeling of overflowing chesed, and that's something we feel now. Here we are living in Mitzvah Yericho for just about a year. This coming Thursday being the 1 year mark on the Hebrew calendar, in a place that is our established home. And on the one hand, living in this desert, you can't help looking around at the most humble of places, built on hills of sand with magnificent views of more hills of sand. A reminder of our own smallness, and a look into the vast desolateness that can be found in nature. But you also look around and see the extravagance of what's happening here. A desert turned oasis, filled with flowers and waters and homes, parks and schools, and vibrant life. And to think that just 50 years ago, this was just another sandy hilltop, seen for its potential by the people who founded Mitzvah Yericho, living in tin can caravans that gave them burns when they opened their metal front doors that had soaked up the desert sun. Within the boundaries of this yishuv, you can't help but see the Geula as described in Yeshayahu Parak 35. Yisasum midbar v'tzia v'tagal arava v'tifrach kechavatzelet. The arid desert shall be glad, the wilderness shall rejoice, and shall bosom like a rose. And a few psukim later, Az Yiglag Yidaleg Ka'ayal Pisach V'Taron Lashon Ilaim Ki Nivkeu Bamidbar Mayim Unechalim Ba'arava. And the lame sheep shall and the lame shall leap like a deer, and the tongue of the mute shall shout aloud. For water shall burst forth in the desert, streams in the wilderness. Yeshayahu essentially describes when the impossible will become possible. Water-filled desert and all. V'haya hasarav le'agam v'tzima'on le'mabuei mayim b'naveh tanim rivtza chatzir l'chana v'goma. Torrid earth shall become a pool, parched land, fountains of water, the home of jackals a pasture, the abode of ostriches, reeds, and rushes. You wouldn't think it's possible that the desert home of jackals will become a Naveh, a pasture.
Almost done. And yet we're witness. Anyone who has been on the road from Yerushalayim to Mitzvah Yericho has seen the flocks shepherding on the desert mountains here, or the gorgeous green carpet that blankets all of these desert hills after the winter rains. You look at these hills and say, how can they turn green? But if you haven't seen it, come back in 6 months and let it take your breath away, because they do. Or you go back 60 years and can't believe that where we are now was under Jordanian rule, and yet it was. The road from here to Yerushalayim goes through Naomi Shemer's tunnel because no one would believe when she released Yerushalayim Shel Zahav that just 1 month later, her line of Ve'ein Yored Layam HaMelech Derech Yericho would no longer ring true. Our family living on the road between Yerushalayim and Yericho is ostensibly a miracle. The impossible can become possible. So who are we not to feel like a David HaMelech, sitting in our own little Mitzvah Yericho palace, surrounded by beauty, feeling grateful, feeling a sense of security, and feeling surrounded by Kadosh Baruch Hu's blessings. And yet, Re'ei na anochi yoshev b'veit harazim, v'aron Elokim yoshev b'toch ha'yiriyah. Here I am, dwelling in a house of cedar, while Hashem's Aron abides in a tent. How can we feel settled when where is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's house? Shlomo Naveh was born on the 11th of Av, the day after mourning the lack of a Beit Hashem, of mourning the presence of a proper Naveh Kodshecha, and the day after mourning the many tzarot that have befallen us when we don't have Hashem clearly in our midst. Unfortunately, we have seen, even in our recent days, that while prophecies of redemption are unfolding before our eyes, the tzarot have not come to an end. Amongst the closing keynote of Tisha B'Av morning, we say, Eli Tzion v'araha k'mo isha b'tziraha, mourn for Tzion and her cities like a woman giving birth. The incredulous nature of childbirth is that even in tremendous pain, there is some inkling of awareness that there is a process taking place in which the pain is leading ultimately towards tremendous happiness, even when the current experience doesn't seem bearable. That is the perspective leaving Tisha B'Av and heading towards Shabbat Nachamu. Shlomo Naveh was born in that few-day window between Tisha B'Av and Tu B'Av, a time of transforming our nation from a place of rift and unrest in the Sinat Chinam that triggered the destruction to one of Jewish unity and love that is marked on Tu B'Av. We are told in Zechariah that ultimately Tzom HaChamishi Yalavet Yehuda L'Sason L'Simcha Mo'adim Tovim. The fast of the fifth month, Tisha B'Av, will become an occasion for joy and gladness, happy festivals for the house of Yehuda. Tisha B'Av will become a joyful holiday, and this year we got a taste of exactly that, with Tisha B'Av falling on Shabbat, where suddenly Tisha B'Av becomes a day where we celebrate the Kedusha of the day, and don't engage in any trace of mourning or fasting, to the extent that the Gemara in Tani describes that Tisha B'Av shechalio b'Shabbat, v'chen erev Tisha B'Av shechalio b'Shabbat, ocha v'shoteh kol tzarko, u'maleh al shulchano, afilu k'sudat Shlomo b'shato. That if the 9th of Av, or the eve of the 9th of Av occurs on Shabbat, you don't reduce the amount of food you eat. You can eat and drink as much as you're required, and even put a spread on your table like that of Shlomo HaMelech in his time. Rav Tzadok HaKohen taught that the 9th of Av will become a holiday, but will take on the nature of one with a festival on the first and last days, with Chol HaMoed in the middle. Rav Ari Khan suggests, based on this approach, that ultimately Tisha B'Av will commemorate the coming of Mashiach, followed by Chol HaMoed, and then Tu B'Av, the 7th day, will be the day that the Beit HaMikdash will be rebuilt. Shlomo Naveh, both your names together can mean beautiful completion. We daven for the beauty of our own shleimut, peace of mind, self-fulfillment, for clarity, and to experience a time beyond the peace and grandeur of Shlomo HaMelech. Shlomo HaMelech merited the building of the first Naveh, the first Beit HaMikdash. May Shlomo Naveh merit to bring times of Naveh Shalom and the building of the third and final Naveh, B'mehera Yadvayaminu. One last thank you. Sometimes Hashem has a plan for the world, a salvation that's meant to be brought about, and Hashem picks those messengers who will help make sure things go according to plan. A Gemara in Sota describes one such case. When Moshe's teva was on the Nile, Bat Paro's maidens saw that she was inclined to save Moshe, and they tried to convince her out of it. They said to Bat Paro, "It is the way of the world that when a king makes a decree, even if it isn't kept by all, at least his household fulfills his word." At that point, the Gemara describes how a certain Milah comes to make sure that these maidens don't get their way and successfully convince Bat Paro out of saving Moshe. Who shows up? None other than the Malach Gabriel, who strikes them to the ground and the maidens die. A day that could have been the end of Moshe becomes the day of his salvation and ultimately leads to redeeming the entire Jewish people in Yetziat Mitzrayim. Gabi, how often do I feel like you are that Malach Gabriel saving the ship? That you changed the course of events so it seemed like an impossible reality is suddenly possible. We could use this bris as a small example, but it holds true for every aspect of our lives. So thank you. Amichai, Odeli, and Shlomo are so fortunate to see you model what it means to dream the impossible and make Hashem's will a reality. There is no question that I, above all, am so blessed as a result.